Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Wednesday, August 20th, 2025. Today is 684 days into war and conflict and violence, particularly in Gaza, but along the Israeli border in South Lebanon and other parts of the Middle East. An update of the last 24 hours. Reports indicate that at least 56 Palestinians were killed and 185 wounded in the past day. Of those, 22 were aid seekers, according to the health ministry in Gaza. The ministry also reported that 3 people died of hunger over the past day. That means that the death toll of those who've died from hunger-related causes, including malnutrition, has risen to 269 people. Of those 269 deaths, 112 of them have been children. The overall death toll since October 7th, 2023 is now 62,122 people. That's a minimum number. That includes 10,576 Palestinians who've been killed since the break in the most recent ceasefire that was in March of 2025. And the number of fatalities among those who have sought humanitarian assistance is now 2,018 individuals. So that's significant. Also in the news, we've been waiting to hear what's going to happen since the Security Cabinet in Israel approved the invasion of Gaza City. The Israeli military announced today that they're calling up an additional 60,000 reservists and that they're lengthening the service of 20,000 who are already currently serving as reservists in preparation for an expanded military operation in Gaza City. The defense minister in Israel, Katz, today said that plans have been approved to begin the new phase in those operations. The military added with a source suggesting that the Army's chief of staff is expected to approve military operations in other additional parts of Gaza City in coming days. Meanwhile, the IDF issued evacuation orders for central Gaza's Jabalia area and the outskirts of Gaza City. Israel is not letting humanitarian supplies into Gaza in quantities that are sufficient to avert widespread starvation. That was according to the UN Human Rights Office. They said that yesterday. It was reported by Reuters. And the Red Cross has warned that the transfer of Palestinians to the south of Gaza risks worsening an already catastrophic situation. The civilian population in Gaza is living in abhorrent conditions, with more than 80% of Gaza already impacted by evacuation orders. It's unimaginable that civilians could be compelled to move to an even smaller area. Additionally, a large-scale evacuation would create additional risks for civilians, given the prevailing conditions on the ground. We do know that Hamas agreed to a ceasefire proposal that was put together by Qatar and Egypt. Now Israel is considering the terms of that deal. They're considering Hamas's response. This proposal would include a 60-day ceasefire and release of half of the hostages that are held in Gaza. It's believed that there are 50 hostages held. Roughly 20 of them are believed to still be alive. Separately, a Palestinian source indicated that Israel's response is to be expected in the coming 2 days. In the occupied West Bank, Israel has given the final approval for the controversial settlement project that's called E1. The E1 area construction plan will bisect the West Bank. This is considered by many a move to skew the borders of a possible future Palestinian state. In the occupied West Bank, it essentially would cut the north of the West Bank from the south of the West Bank. Commenting on the approval, Israel's far-right finance minister Smotrich said that the Palestinian state is being erased from the table, not with slogans, but with actions. We should heed his rhetoric because he's not wrong. In Israel, Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday accused the Australian Prime Minister Albanese of betraying Israel and of abandoning the Jewish community in Australia. Australia on Monday barred a far-right member of Netanyahu's ruling coalition from entering their country, with Israel revoking the visas of Australian representatives to the Palestinian Authority in response. In Israel, also, hundreds of ultra-Orthodox anti-IDF draft protesters have blocked major central roads in Israel. The Committee to Save the Torah World, a hardline faction staunchly against the enlistment in the IDF, has said that the Sons clarify today, you declare war on the students of the Torah and a war you shall receive. On Highway 2, which is the road that links Tel Aviv and Haifa, also known as the Coastal Highway, clashes erupted between protesters and drivers. Related to Iran, Reuters reported today that Iran says the moment for effective nuclear talks with the U.S. has not yet been reached. Negotiations with the U.S. must be held at their own time. Every negotiation has a specific time called negotiation maturity, and it must reach that maturity in order to be held. That was the Foreign Minister Arachi. In my opinion, we've not yet reached that point of maturity where effective negotiations with the United States can take place, he said. Syria's foreign minister yesterday held a rare direct meeting with an Israeli delegation. This happened in Paris. The U.S. brokered talks to help Syria and Israel normalize relations, according to a senior Trump administration official. 4 IDF soldiers were also loosely wounded near the Syrian border. This was from old Syrian munitions during search activity in the Mount Hermon area. This is near Israel's border with Syria. In terms of international responses, French President Emmanuel Macron said today he spoke with several Middle East leaders, saying that they all agreed that Israel's plans to take over Gaza will lead to a complete disaster for both peoples, dragging the region into more permanent war. Noting he also spoke with Jordan's King Abdullah II and Egyptian President El-Sisi, Macron said that all three believe that the war can only end under the following conditions: a permanent ceasefire being established, all hostages being released, humanitarian aid delivered into Gaza, Hamas being disarmed, and the Palestinian Authority being bolstered in Gaza. In the United States, the U.S. State Department has sanctioned judges of the International Criminal Court. This came from Secretary of State Marco Rubio today. Sanctions are being imposed on 4 officials of the ICC over the prosecution of nationals of the U.S. or Israel without the consent of either nation, as 3 of the officials involved in the arrest warrants against Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defense Minister Gallant. That's what that was a response to. Netanyahu welcomed those sanctions on ICC officials, determined action supporting truth and justice. That was the language he used in response to Rubio's announcement. President Trump has pulled the security clearances of 37 current and former intelligence officials, including several involved in the Middle East. Some of these names will be names you recognize: Andrew Miller, the former Israel-Palestine point person in Blinken's State Department; Maher Bitar, a Palestinian-American official under the Obama and Biden administrations; Yael Einstadt. He's a former Anti-Defamation League executive and cybersecurity professional; and Megan Doherty, Deputy Assistant Administrator for U.S. aid under the Biden administration. CMEP has worked alongside a number of those officials in past years. A 58% majority of Americans think that every country should recognize Palestine, according to a new Reuters poll. Closing with an update about Christian responses to the Middle East, Cardinal Zuppi, the head of the Italian Bishops' Conference, led a prayer vigil on Thursday of last week. It was the eve of the Feast of the Assumption, and he read the name of every child who has died in the conflict between Israel and Hamas since October 2023. He said, "We pronounce the names one by one. They ask us if we commit ourselves to finding or pursuing the path to peace with greater intelligence and passion, starting with a ceasefire and offering the conditions for doing so, from the release of hostages to not taking an entire people group hostage." Zuppi took turns with dozens of other members of the diocese reading the names and ages of the 16 Israeli children who died on October 7th during the attacks by Hamas, and the 12,111 names of Palestinian children who died in Israel's occupation of Gaza through July 25th. The names of the Israeli children were taken from the Israeli government data, and the Palestinian children's names were compiled by the Ministry of Health in Gaza. The document was 469 pages long. It took roughly 7 hours to read, starting in the afternoon and going until the late evening. You can find pictures and news about Cardinal Zuppi and the 7-hour prayer vigil for the children victims of the Israel-Hamas war online. I'd encourage you to do so. May we not give up in our prayers and calling for a comprehensive permanent ceasefire in all of our efforts to advocate for humanitarian assistance to be allowed into Gaza and for the horrors of conflict to be brought to an end. May God go before us in the name of Christ. Amen.